You are listening to the Examine Life with Bram Levinson. So here I am again. I've just pulled my laptop and the microphone and a copy of an interpretation of one of the Hindu scriptures into this little room where I record these podcasts because I felt the inspiration sort of pop up. And I have learned by now that when that inspiration hits, you have to do something with it. You've got to express it. I have to express it. I've got to get it from thought into form. And I suppose it's debatable whether this is form or formless, this medium of podcasting, but nonetheless, I've learned through the years writing the books and with everything that I do that when something hits, if I don't do something with it or at least write it down, I lose it. And I trust that inspiration is hitting me at the right time so that these messages can be conveyed to the right listeners, the right people. So I just finished a coaching session with a client, and it was the last one with her for the time being. Who knows what the future holds, but in our 10-session sort of program, this was the last session. And something came up that I thought is really, really worth sharing. I think that it is normal for people to seek assistance from other people, whether they be psychologists or psychiatrists or coaches or teachers or friends, when there is fear and when there is insecurity that is influencing how people live their lives. I've spoken about this before, but ultimately we are either motivated into the world by fear or by hope and faith. When we are motivated by fear, we are being influenced by how things could go wrong, or why we shouldn't, or why we don't deserve to, or why it might end badly. These are the internal dialogue rather that goes on in every one of our minds is constantly working. It's it's projecting these thoughts, or these thoughts are being projected into our own little personal zeitgeist. And what's happening is we are allowing these thoughts to influence how we act and if we act. And many of us will restrain ourselves from speaking what we really want to speak, or doing what we really want to do, or eating what we really want to eat, just living life the way we feel compelled to live it, because in the awareness of the other and in awareness of other people and the world outside and risk and failure, what happens is we end up getting in our own way with these thoughts that prevent us from expressing our own true authentic nature out into the world. We prevent ourselves from expressing ourselves out into the world while we have the ability to do it in these bodies, because fear is at work. It gives us every reason why we shouldn't. Now, the thing that we need to know about fear, seen through a psychological lens, is that fear will always motivate us to move in the opposite direction of where we want to go, every single time. And obviously, I'm not talking about if you want to do something that we know is not going to end well. If you want to, try to, hammer your hand to see if it's going to not end disastrously. Listen, that's obviously a foolish thing. We know that that's going to be harmful, so there you go. But typically, a lot of us have a lot of negative thoughts going on in our minds, fear that is preventing us from acting in specific ways and from speaking in specific ways. And we give it value, we give it worth, we give it power by listening to it, and then by, on some level, agreeing that it is correct in whatever it is telling us. And because it's correct, we're not going to do certain things, because if we do certain things, then that fear, or rather the outcome that the fear has convinced us is going to happen. Then when it does happen, we will, sort of be hard on ourselves and say, well, I knew that was going to happen. Why did I let that happen? Blah, 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 blah. When there is not a guaranteed negative outcome, when harm is not the guaranteed outcome. We need to be better at curbing fear, at paying attention to what fear is telling us, and in many cases, going in the opposite direction of where fear is telling us we should go. Now, with this client who I was coaching earlier, feelings of inferiority had been part of our conversations, fear, doubt, uncertainty. And what I found unbelievably fascinating about today's session was that she basically told me that she was conquering her fears. She was not paying attention to the internal voice that was telling her not to do something, not to approach this person, not to have the conversation. She was just doing it. And the outcome of her jumping beyond that fear was that she was feeling such a sense of elation, number one, at how things were turning out, but also at her ability to do it. Now, we are told, there's this old expression that says something to the effect of, forget about the destination, it's the journey that matters. And I want to parallel that with a teaching from the Bhagavad Gita. And again, the Bhagavad Gita, I've spoken about before, is a Hindu epic. It is considered part of the Hindu scriptures, but it is referred to as an epic. And there's a teaching from the Bhagavad Gita that tells us, as for you, do the work that comes to you, but don't look for the results. Don't be motivated by the fruits of your actions, nor become attached to inaction. I think that this is a brilliant teaching. And this is from chapter 2, verse 47 from the Bhagavad Gita, if you want to look it up for yourself. But as for you, do the work that comes to you, but don't look for the results. Don't be motivated by the fruits of your actions, nor become attached to inaction. What I find particularly interesting in this verse is, don't be motivated by the fruits of your actions. Don't look for the results. When you consider that there are not countless things that we do because we understand that there is an outcome that we are attaching to, and that's why we do it. Like, you go to work because you know you're getting a paycheck, right? We know that we are going to travel so that we can experience new experiences. We want to have a conversation because we want to get some sort of resolution. Everything that we do has a goal at the end of why we're doing it. And that is why we're doing it, to attain that goal. This expression, it's the journey, not the destination. This teaching from the Bhagavad Gita is telling us it isn't really about what you think you're going to get out of it. The truth of the matter is, when we have a goal, and this is being seen through a very spiritual lens, but when you feel like you need to move in a specific direction because you want this thing from it, you think that this thing is going to be the result of it, it's not actually the result that matters. It's the inclination to move in that direction that matters. You are being spiritually called to move in a direction that you wouldn't ordinarily move in. And the literal understanding of why this is happening is because there's this thing, this dangling carrot at the end of the whole process so that you will get something. So you think that that's why you want to move in that direction. But it's not. That's just what's getting your ego involved. It's what looks attractive. Ultimately, when we feel the nudge or the intuitive urge to move in a specific direction, that's what we have to pay attention to. We have to pay attention to that urge, because to move in that direction is bringing us somewhere that we wouldn't have gone in any other context, any other way. And it is in moving in that direction that all of a sudden we start to experience things that we wouldn't have experienced. We start to meet people who potentially we wouldn't have met, or we meet people who we already knew, but who either show us that there is an opportunity to do something or to move in another direction that we weren't aware of. It is on that path towards something that all of a sudden we start to learn more, potentially about why we're moving in that direction in the first place. And what ends up happening for many people is, as they move towards, or rather as they move towards that initial goal, something happens en route, and they realize that, you know what, that goal that they wanted initially, not attractive anymore. There's something else. There's something else that's pulling them in another direction, and potentially that is where they were meant to go the whole time. But because we don't have all the information, all we know is move in this direction. Just move in this direction. You think you're going to get the house, the phone, the friendship, the conversation from it? Great. Don't get attached to that house, that phone, that conversation. Just understand that by you moving in that direction, that's what matters. So this teaching from the Gita is telling us, don't look for the results. Just trust that you moving in that direction is occurring for a reason. Don't be motivated by the fruits of your actions, but don't become attached to inaction. Now, fear keeps us in inaction. Fear, for some of us, will tell us not to have the conversation, not to take the risk, not to try to see how beautiful life can be, not to see how incredible your day-to-day could be, as opposed to just mediocre or okay. So this teaching is also saying, don't pay attention to fear. Don't become attached to inaction. Because when we start to pay attention to fear, it keeps us silent, and it keeps us stationary, and it keeps us scared. And those are killers. They feed doubt, they feed uncertainty, and that keeps us from going out into the world and expressing ourselves as we are, with the hope that everything is possible, that anything is attainable as long as we get out of our own way, and as long as we stop attaching to what we think we're getting. So, listen, a good way to apply all of what I'm trying to say, a good way to sort of put this into practical application. Stop looking at the paycheck that you're getting for whatever work that you're doing as the end all, and start paying attention to what you are experiencing at work. Start to pay attention to the people you're meeting and the lessons you're learning, whatever joy you can glean from your work environment and from the people you work with, maybe even how you get to work or get back. Start to look at all of the things that occur between you setting off and you coming back. It really is about what we find out on that journey, and it's not necessarily only about the journey that we're learning. We're learning about ourselves. We're learning about what we are capable of when we jump beyond ourselves and take risks. And those risks are basically just asking us to not pay attention to fear. What I have learned in my experience of life is that the fear of something is always worse than that something. So if fear is telling you not to have the conversation, have the conversation. Because the longer you don't, the more you're feeding the fear, and the more it's holding you hostage. Very often by having the conversation, number one, we find resolution in many cases way quicker than we thought that we would. But that then leads to something else. We start to show the people around us, maybe the people we're having a conversation with or the person we're having a conversation with, we're showing them that we have the confidence to deal with potentially confrontational experiences and contexts. And maybe that gets their respect. And maybe we start to inspire them to do the same thing. And then all of a sudden, we're just being honest with each other. How amazing is that? And not being held back by the fear of, what if this goes wrong? Yeah, but what if it goes right? Why aren't we talking about, what if life is better and more beautiful and more brilliantly, more of all the things you want if you just jump beyond yourself? What would happen if we stop paying attention to fear and start feeding not only hope, but faith that we have what it takes to not end up with everything falling apart? Listen, we're not going to implode. And I always say this, we're not going to implode. We're not going to go hungry. We're not going to go homeless if we stop paying attention to fear. Now, again, let me disclaimer that. If you know that something is going to be harmful, then that fear is good. It's an instinctual thing. It exists from like caveman times, cave person times. And it's there for us to be able to assess when there is danger in our environment and how to avoid that danger so we can stay alive. I get it. However, because we have the ability to, be massively expansive in the world, we also have the ability to be afraid of that expansion. Don't be afraid of your potential. Don't feed fear anymore. Stop paying attention to what you think you're going to get out of a situation and just get into the situation and see what exists in it that you could not have known about if you hadn't walked into it. Start taking chances. Start taking risks, because the payoff is huge and it is yours and yours alone to experience. And I really do believe that when you do start to experience these moments that show us just how much muchness there is and how much beauty there is, that those moments exist so that we can inspire other people to do the same thing, because I believe that we are here to learn from each other and to lift each other up. So you have homework. That homework is to jump beyond yourself. Do the work that comes to you, but don't look for the results. Don't be motivated by the fruits of your actions, nor become attached to inaction. Pay attention to the journey, because that is what it is all about. Think about it. I'll see you later. This has been the Examine Life with Bram Levinson.